Xira the Golden Sting, Bug Mommy if you will. For 1 black red green we have a 3/3 insect assassin with flying and haste. Whenever this attacks, we can put an egg counter on another target creature without an egg counter, and whenever that creature dies, if it has an egg counter on it, we get to draw a card and create a 1/1 black insect creature token with flying. So now that we know our commander, let's talk about the budget restrictions for this deck. The price needs to be anywhere from $35 to $55. It needs to be built around sacrificed and active treason style effects. So let's jump right into the deck. Starting with the sack outlets, let's talk about Betrothed of Fire. 1 in a red, this is an enchantment aura, where we could put it on our commander. It says, sacrifice an untapped creature, and the enchanted creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So this could make our commander huge with all those insects that we're going to have. We can then deal a lot of damage with our commander because it has flying, so it's likely it's going to be unblocked with the evasion that's on her. It also says, sacrifice enchanted creature. So we could sacrifice our commander or whoever this is attached to, and all other creatures we control get +2/+0. So if we have 10 insects that are 1/1s, they're now 3/1s, and that's 30 damage just from sacrificing whatever this was attached to. Next we're talking about Blood Baron, Bloodflow Connoisseur, and Bloodthrone Vampire. As you see, blood is in their name, and they want it, so we're going to sacrifice whatever creatures that we need to. Hopefully they have the egg counters on them from our commander, and that's going to let us draw cards and make even more insects. We also have Carrion Feeder, Drawshopper, and Viscerus here. What's great is that all these sack outlets are going to cost us 0 mana. It's just costing us sacrificing a creature, and what's great is that it doesn't specify token or non-token, just whatever creature that we have. And last we have Evolutionary Leap, so we can pay a green and sacrifice a creature to reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature card, put that into our hand, and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. While this does cost a green mana and sacrificing a creature, this is a great way for us to get creatures into our hand and later cast if for some reason we're not able to have creatures on the battlefield or we're not drawing into any as well. Next, let's talk about the active treason cards. So these are cards that are going to let us gain control of our opponent's creatures. There's Active Aggression, Bloody Betrayal, and Goat Nap. All of these are going to let us gain control of a creature, whether it's ours or an opponent's. We get to then untap that creature, and then there's an added effect from each of these. What's neat about Active Aggression is that for 3 and 2 red mana, specifically Phyrexian mana, so we can pay 2 life instead of one of those red plips, this can end up being a 3 mana spell with 4 life added onto it, instead of 5 mana. Bloody Betrayal is going to get us a blood token in addition to this, and Goat Nap, if we happen to steal a creature that is a goat, it gets +3/+0, which probably will not happen. Next, let's talk about Captivating Crew. For 4 mana, we can gain control of target creature an opponent controls. We get to untap it, it gains haste, and we control it until end of turn, but we can only activate this as if it were a sorcery, which is just fine. What's great about just paying this 4 mana every single time, it is as if we're casting all of these previous spells from our hand, such as Traitorous Greed. This is another spell that costs 3 in a red. We get to gain control of a creature, untap that creature, it gains haste, but now we get 2 mana from this. There's also Hijack, Involuntary Employment, and Wrangle. Gaining control of other people's creatures is great because we can later sacrifice them and put egg counters on them as well. Next, we're talking about Mass Mutiny. We can gain control of 1 creature from each opponent, untap them, and they gain haste. Same with Molten Primordial. Does the exact same thing, but now it's on a creature that when it enters the battlefield, we gain control of 1 creature from each opponent. And it also has haste. So far we have met the restriction of what our patron is looking for. It has sacrifice, it has active treason cards. But let's talk about the rest of the deck and how we're going to make this work. Let's talk about my favorite thing to do in any deck, which is to draw cards. Let's talk about Compost. For 1 and a green, whenever a black card is put into an opponent's graveyard, you may draw a card. What's great is that we have 3 opponents. It's likely that one of them could be playing black in their decks, maybe even mono black, which would be way sweet. This could be a great way for us to draw cards. And Death Reap Ritual. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. Sounds great because we want to have our creatures sacrificed anyways. We could end up drawing 4 cards in one turn cycle. Garna Bloodfist of Keld. Whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking, otherwise it deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is going to be really sweet, especially with those 1/1 insects that we have. Again, let's assume we have 10 out on the battlefield. If we attack with all 10, and let's say 3 of them are blocked and they died, we get to draw 3 cards. This is a really powerful card in this deck. Life's Legacy. So for 1 and a green, we have to sacrifice a creature. In addition to casting this, we get to draw cards equal to the creatures that was sacrificed. There are some huge creatures in here, which I'll mention later, but worst case scenario, we pay 2 mana, sacrifice one of our insect tokens, and only draw 1 card. A little less, or maybe even worse, sacrificing our commander, which we really don't want to do. We'd only draw 3 cards from 2 mana. But like I said, I'll mention the huge creatures in a later category. Next is Midnight Reaper. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, this deals 1 damage to us, and we get to draw a card. Moldavine Reclamation. Whenever a creature you control dies, we draw a card and gain 1 life. So what's great is that it doesn't specify non-token token, so even when our insects are going to die, we're drawing cards off of that. Very powerful card. Similar to Life's Legacy, we have Momentous Fall. In addition to casting the spell, we have to sacrifice a creature. We'll draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, and then we gain life equal to its toughness. Morbid Opportunist. So anytime a creature dies, we're drawing a card at most once each turn. Rishkar's Expertise. So with those huge creatures that we have in this deck, we get to draw equal to their power, and then we can cast something for free as long as it's mana value 5 or less from our hand. And that includes the cards that we're drawing as well. The last card I want to mention is Skull Clamp. This is going to be really sweet for the deck since we have so many insect tokens that we're going to be making. They're 1/1s. Whenever the equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards, so we can pay 1 mana to draw 2. This is a great exchange and a very powerful card. So our commander is really important to us, so let's talk about ways to protect it. We have Mask of Avacyn and Mirror Shield. These are great budget options for protecting our important creatures such as our commander. This is going to give our commander hexproof, which means our opponents can no longer target it. They're going to have to use things like board wipes or specifically try to target the equipment that we have here. Now, next I want to mention some cards that don't really have a category, just really important to mention in this deck. The first of them is Damogoth Titan. So for 4 mana, black or green, however we want to spend it, we get an 11/10, and whenever it attacks or blocks, we have to sacrifice a creature. This is not a big deal to us at all because of all the creatures that we'll be making from this deck. This is a very powerful card, especially if we end up having to sacrifice this for 2 to 4 mana from the previously mentioned cards. We can draw a huge amount of cards off of this or deal a huge amount of damage to our opponent. Kolrath Knight. So for 3 mana, whether it's black or red, we get a 3/3 elemental knight with flying and wither. Creatures your opponents control with counters on them can't attack or block. This is great and really going to postpone them doing anything to us, so we can probably get away with a lot of things, especially with all the egg counters we're putting on any creature. Radiant Performer. This is going to be a powerhouse card in this deck. It's a 2/2 with flash that costs 5 mana. Whenever this enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, choose target spell or ability that targets only single permanent or player. Copy that spell or ability for each other permanent or player the spell or ability could target. Each copy targets a different one of those permanents and players. So Radiant Performer, along with our commander, whenever it attacks, we get to put an egg counter on another target creature without an egg counter on it. This will put an egg counter on every single creature on the battlefield. So for 5 mana, we're going to do a lot. Wolfgar of Icewind Dale. This now makes our attacking creatures with their abilities. For example, our commander, we now get to put 2 egg counters on 2 separate creatures, so 1 for each of them. And it also triggers itself, which it has melee. Whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you attacked this combat. So now that can be +2/+2. Photo Titan. For 6 mana, we get a 7/2. When it dies, we return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of his or her next end. This is a huge card for this deck. We can always put an egg counter on it, sacrifice it, and we're going to get it back the same as Reassembling Skeleton, except now we have to pay 2 mana to bring it back to the battlefield tapped. The last category I want to talk about are cards that can bring our creatures from the graveyard back to the battlefield. So let's talk about Dread Return, Rise Again, and Victimize. Dread Return says return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Simple and straight to the point for only 4 mana. We can also have Flashback, which means we get to cast it for its flashback cost. So we just sacrifice 3 creatures and we get to return target creature from our graveyard back to the battlefield. Rise Again. For 5 mana, we return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. And Victimize, for 3 mana, we choose 2 creatures in our graveyard and sacrifice a creature, and then they swap. We get those 2 creatures we chose from our graveyard back to the battlefield tapped. Riveteer's Ascendancy. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, you may return target creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard back to the battlefield tapped, but we only get to do this once each turn. And that's absolutely fine. We want to sacrifice our creatures, so why not get the added benefit of potentially getting something back for free, as long as it's less CMC. And the last card is Whisper Blood Liturgist. We can tap it, sacrifice 2 creatures, and return target creature card from our graveyard back to the battlefield. And what's really sweet is that if we sacrifice 2 cards that have the 8 counters on them, this could be our opponent's cards as well with all the active treason we have going on here. We get to draw 2 cards, make 2 insects, and our opponents lose their creatures. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love this one right here. Thank you to Drewby for being a patron to this channel and choosing Xira for this deck's commander. Definitely a challenging commander, but a lot of fun. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.